This video is sponsored by Audible. For a free audiobook, use the link in the description below. Welcome back to the series where I'm tier ranking all 256 Twinborn combinations. This is part 6 of the series and I have 16 more Twinborn types to rank. All 16 of the Twinborn types for this video were named by me and other users in the Exploring the Cosmere Discord server. If you'd like to help create names for Twinborn types in future parts of this series, make sure you join the Discord server. The first Twinborn combination we have is Anchor Heart. Anchor Hearts can use their allomantic brass to soothe the emotions of others, and they can use their ferrochemical iron to store physical weight. These two powers don't work together in any way that I can see. They're both good powers. I really like ferrochemical iron a lot. It can be very good when you're actively storing or when you're tapping it. These are both good powers, but they don't work together, so I'm gonna put it in B tier, and I might change that as I go through the video. Next up, we have Slow Swift. Slow Swifts can use their allomantic cadmium to slow down time in a bubble around themselves, and they can use their ferrochemical steel to store physical speed. If you recall, Slow Swift is the name of a character from Era 1. Vin meets with them in Hero of Ages. He's an old man that tells her stories of creatures from other lands. So this name is paying homage to that character. Allomantic cadmium and ferrochemical steel. Would they work together very well? I don't know. It's interesting because when the Twinborn throws up their cadmium bubble around themselves, they're gonna feel like they're moving normally. But from their perspective, everything outside of that cadmium bubble looks like it's moving rapidly. And then from the perspective of somebody outside that cadmium bubble looking in, it's going to look like the Slow Swift is standing still pretty much or moving extremely slowly. Now, if you couple that with ferrochemical steel and you're storing your speed while you're in the cadmium bubble, then you're pretty much going to look like a statue. From the outside looking in, it will look like you're not moving at all. But if you're in your cadmium bubble and you tap your steel and you increase your speed greatly, then I guess people from outside the cadmium bubble looking in, it would look like you were moving at normal speed, I suppose. It seems like it would sort of waste your ferrochemical steel if you tap it while you have your cadmium bubble up around you. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you guys see any use cases for these types that I'm missing. But as it stands, I'm going to put Slow Swift in C tier. Next, we have Dowser. Dowsers can use their allomantic chromium to wipe the allomantic reserves of a target, and they can use their ferrochemical brass to store warmth. So to use their chromium, they have to lay their hand on another allomancer, and then they can burn their chromium, and any allomantic reserves that other allomancer has inside of them will vanish, and that other allomancer will feel a chill as they're being leached. And then of course, ferrochemical brass lets you store warmth, basically your body heat, in your brass mind, and then you can tap it at a later time and feel very warm. I could see a Dowser being like a survivalist type maybe, because their ferrochemical brass would let them go into the frigid cold or into very hot environments and they would feel perfectly fine. So maybe they could go on long survival trips seeking out other allomancers, and then once they find them, use their allomantic chromium to wipe the reserves of those other allomancers. Allomantic chromium can be used to drain investiture in general, not just allomancy reserves. So here we have a wob. Somebody asks Brandon, how effective would a leecher be at draining breath? They could be fairly effective. How significant would the difference be between breath and stormlight? And let's see, that I'll raffo for now because we're actually getting the actual numbers. We have certain people working on a project for that. All right, so from this wob, it sounds like you could leech biochromatic breath from an awakener and you could drain the stormlight from a radiant using allomantic chromium. Okay, so in that case, allomantic chromium is pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. These two powers don't necessarily build on one another though, so I think it's gonna go in B tier for me. Next up, we have Weda. Weda Twinborn can use their allomantic duralumin to enhance the current metal being burned within them, and they can use their ferrochemical iron to store physical weight. So the name Weda is the name of a giant bug from New Zealand. They look pretty crazy. If any of you are from New Zealand, let me know in the comments if these bugs are super common. Do they bite? Are they pests? Or what do they do exactly? I'd love to learn. So yeah, let me know. This is one of the gnats of the Twinborn world. Their allomantic duralumin is only useful if they can burn other allomantic metals. But since they can't, it's not going to do anything for them. So they're basically a glorified fairing. That's what I like to call them. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. I'm going to put Weda right in D tier. Then we have Blank Slate. Blank slates can use their allomantic electrum to reveal their future, and they can use their ferrochemical aluminum to store identity. An allomancer burning electrum will see shadows coming from their center of self, showing different actions that they could take in their future. So it basically shows their immediate future. And ferrochemical aluminum, as I've stated in other parts of the series, is one of the metals that we don't know much about at all. Even in the Ars Arcanum, it says true self fairings can store their spiritual sense of identity in an aluminum metal mind. This is an art rarely spoken of outside of Terrace communities, and even among them, it is not yet well understood. So yeah, it's kind of a mystery of what exactly would happen when you store your identity, and especially what would happen when you're tapping your identity. We do know that ferrochemical aluminum is one of the powers that's needed to make unkeyed and unsealed metal minds, but you have to have access to other ferrochemical abilities as well. I do wonder what would happen if a blank slate Twinborn was completely storing their identity in an aluminum mind and then they burned electrum. Would they just not see any electrum shadows at all because they have no identity at the moment? Or would electrum shadows start popping out of other people around them trying to latch on to other identities? If it's the latter case, then it would work very similar to how Atium in Era 1 works. Let me know what you think would happen in that scenario down in the comments. I'm putting blank slate in C tier. Next up, we have Iron Will. Iron Wills can use their allomantic iron to pull metals, and their ferrochemical electrum lets them store determination. Okay, as you guys probably know from previous videos in this series, I don't like ferrochemical electrum that much. It would be a miserable experience to store your determination because you're going to feel depressed and apathetic. You're not going to want to do anything at all. I mean, on the flip side, you can tap that determination to feel on top of the world and very focused, I guess, but it's just too much of a downside in my opinion for storing it. I guess you could store like 10% at a time and just be kind of down rather than completely depressed. So taking that into account, I guess it could be pretty good to just store like 5 to 10% at a time, all the time, and then just slowly build your reserve up for when you really need that extra determination. Maybe an Iron Will Twinborn would be very good at mastering their allomantic iron. They could probably tap their determination during practice sessions with their iron to get into a sort of flow state. Maybe that would let them develop their skills with their allomantic iron at a rapid pace. But I still don't think it's that great. I think Iron Will, for me, is gonna go in B tier. Next up, we have Devourer. Devourers can use their allomantic chromium to wipe the allomantic reserves of a target, and they can use their ferrochemical gold to store health. All right, I think a Devourer would be great in like a law enforcement position. They could chase after a suspect, even if they're an allomancer, and they would pretty much have no fear of getting hurt thanks to their ferrochemical gold. And when they catch up to the suspect and tackle them, for instance, they could burn their chromium. That would let them be sure that the suspect has no allomantic reserves within themselves. I guess Devourers would just be really good in combat situations whenever it comes to fighting other allomancers or other users of investiture in general. So I think Devourer pretty much has combat uses, but I can't think of any good utility uses with these two powers. Either way, I do think it's a really good combo. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Actually, on second thought, I'm going to put it in S tier. Next up, we have Nourisher. Nourishers can use their allomantic nigrosyl to enhance the allomantic burn of a target, and they can use their ferrochemical bendalloy to store energy. To use allomantic nigrosyl, the Twinborn has to lay their hand on another allomancer and then burn their nigrosyl. And as long as that other allomancer is burning a metal within themselves, they'll burn that whole reserve rapidly in a burst of power. And with ferrochemical bendalloy, you can store energy in the form of nutrients or calories. So a Nourisher would be able to consume vast amounts of food and just store all of that energy that they're getting from that food in a Bindalloy mind, and they wouldn't feel full as long as they're actively storing. And then at a later time, they can tap that Bindalloy mind and go for long periods of time without needing to eat. And they could do the same thing with liquids. They just need a second Bindalloy mind for that. I think a Nourisher would be great for a support role in a team of Allomancers. They would barely ever have to take breaks for food or water thanks to their ferrochemical Bindalloy, and they could just be constantly boosting the allomancy of their teammates. Allomantic Nigrosil can also be used offensively if the Nourisher sneaks up on an enemy Allomancer and that Allomancer is burning a metal like tin and they boost that tin. All of that tin will be used up rapidly and it will basically make the enemy Allomancer deaf and blind for a period of time. Nourisher for me is going to have to go in B tier. Now we have Monk. Monks can use their Allomantic Pewter to increase physical strength, and their ferrochemical copper lets them store memories. This Twinborn type has both brains and brawn. I imagine a monk Twinborn being very into martial arts. Their Allomantic Pewter not only increases physical strength, but also increases balance, physical prowess, dexterity, all kind of things. Maybe even flexibility, although I'm not for sure on that one. It would make it extremely easy for them to pick up on the different forms of the martial art that they're currently learning, and they can store all the information in their copper mind, and then they can pull that information out either during training or during a combat situation. Yeah, I think that they would be amazing fighters, and I think they could be very good for utility purposes as well. I really like this combination. I don't think it's busted, but I am gonna put it in S tier. I'm gonna put it ahead of Devourer. Allomantic Pewter is my favorite allomantic metal. Next up, we have Slimshot. Slimshots can use their allomantic steel to push metals, and they can use their ferrochemical Bindalloy to store energy. These two powers might be able to build on each other and help one another out, depending on how quickly the calories from a Bindalloy mind transfer to the body. For instance, if the Slimshot has a bunch of energy stored in their Bindalloy mind from eating a bunch, and they just pull all of that out into their body at once, if they rapidly get fat, then that would increase their weight and make it easier to push metals because they would weigh more. And vice versa, if they just store a bunch of calories all at once into their Bindalloy mind, if it would make them lose body fat and get super lean, it would make it easier for them to push themselves around through the air. I don't know if it would work like that. Probably not, because the body needs to process those calories. If that isn't the case, then I don't think these two powers work together very well at all. Unless maybe the Slimshot is on a mission to stake somebody out, kind of like an assassin, I guess. They could go for long periods of time without needing to eat or drink, just waiting for the perfect opportunity to take a shot at their target. I think this has to go in B tier. The next type is Haze Logger. Haze Loggers can use their allomantic chromium to wipe the allomantic reserves of a target, and they can use their ferrochemical copper to store memories. Maybe they would be very good at studying Allomancers. They could get close to them and just observe them using their powers. And if the Allomancer ever decides to use their power on the Haze Logger could just leech them of any of their allomantic reserves. That extends to more than just Allomancers, of course. They could study users of investiture in general. Maybe a Haze Logger would actually be a really good world hopper now that I think about it. They could log all their experiences in their copper mind, and they would be pretty safe from users of investiture as long as they can get close enough to leech them. I'm gonna put Haze Logger in A tier. Next up, we have Locust. Locusts can use their allomantic duralumin to enhance current metal burned, and they can use their ferrochemical electrum to store determination. This is another example of a gnat from the Twinborn world, aka a glorified fairing. They are going straight to D tier. Then we have Connoisseur. Connoisseurs can use their allomantic tin to increase senses, and they can use their ferrochemical Bindalloy to store energy. I think being a connoisseur would be pretty cool. You could just pig out on all kind of food and burn your allomantic tin to make it taste even better. And you could just store all those excess calories in your Bindalloy mind, never needing to worry about getting fat. And then you have a surplus of calories that you could just carry around with you anytime that you need to go without eating. Connoisseurs would probably be pretty good food critics, or maybe like wine tasters. or whiskey tasters. I think burning tin would definitely help you pick out the different notes in whatever you're drinking or eating. I don't think a connoisseur would be good in a fight, but they do have some good utility uses and just like self-satisfaction uses if you just want to eat a bunch of good food. I think it's a good enough combo to go in A tier for me. Next up, we have Raker. Rakers can use their allomantic iron to pull metals, and they can use their ferrochemical chromium to store fortune. Fortune's a very strange ferrochemical metal. The Ars Arcanum says, spinner pharynx can store fortune in a chromium metal mine, making themselves unlucky during active storage, and can tap it at a later time to increase their luck. So yeah, we're just gonna assume it's luck for this series. Okay, so whenever a Raker is actively storing their fortune, they're gonna be unlucky. I guess you don't necessarily have to store all of your fortune at once. You could just store a little bit. So if they're only storing 5 to 10% of their fortune at a time, they probably won't have too many bad events happen to them while they're actively storing. I guess they would just be a little less lucky than normal. And then they could tap that fortune at a later time to become much more lucky than they normally would. So a Raker would probably be good at gambling, right? I can't remember for sure, but I vaguely remember Wax using his steel to pick a lock, maybe, in Era 2. A Raker could probably do something similar with their iron, pulling on the components within the lock. I guess if they're actively tapping their fortune from the chromium mine, it would probably make them much more likely to succeed in that lock picking. I'll put them in B tier, at the top of B tier. Our second to last Twinborn type is Death Watcher. Death Watchers can use their allomantic tin to increase their senses, and they can use their ferrochemical gold to store health. I could see a Death Watcher being some kind of researcher that needs to be very close to dangerous things, maybe like an explosion or a car crash. They could burn their allomantic tin to take in more details than most people would normally. And as long as they have enough health stored up, they'd be able to get closer to these dangerous events than would be normally safe for an average person. They'd probably be pretty good in a combat situation as well. I mean, in Era 1, Spook showed us how effective burning tin can be in combat situations, although he was an allomantic tin savant because he just burned it all the time. But I think even without being a savant, it could help in combat. Death Watcher is gonna go in S tier for me. The last Twinborn type for this video is Outburst. Outbursts can use their allomantic zinc to riot the emotions of others, and they can use their ferrochemical steel to store physical speed. These are both pretty great powers. Zinc lets you target an emotion of somebody else, and you can heighten that emotion as long as you're burning your allomantic zinc. So a skilled zinc allomancer can use it to effectively manipulate other people to do what they want. And ferrochemical steel, of course, lets you cover great distances in a very short period of time. We saw Sazed use this in Era 1 to cover 6 weeks worth of walking in like a 5 or 6 day period. It could also be used to get things done rapidly, I would imagine. I'm imagining myself being able to tap physical speed while I'm editing videos. Maybe I could get it done in like a quarter of the time. But I don't really see these two powers working well together. They don't build on one another, but they're both so good on their own. I think it's gonna go in A tier for me. There's my ranking for these 16 medals, and here is the combined tier list for all 6 parts of this series so far. It's a lot of fun to speculate how these Twinborn powers would function, but if you want to see the Twinborn types that Brandon has already written about, you'll want to read Mistborn Era 2, which starts with the Alloy of Law. You can get that book or any other book of your choice as an audiobook right now for free, thanks to the sponsor of this video, Audible. Just click the link in the description and sign up for a Premium Plus 30-day free trial, and you'll get an audiobook that's yours to keep, even if you cancel your membership. The membership also gives you access to thousands of other audiobooks and podcasts in the Audible Plus catalog. Sign up at audibletrial.com/etc or click the link in the description below. Also, if you're enjoying my content, consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member or a patron. Those will be linked below as well. That's it for this video, guys. I'll see you in part 7.